I really like a fresh caught salmon. Pan fried first for a nice color and then steamed in the same pan to cook evenly through. And every time I cook, I'm reminded of the time I spent this summer working at my mom's restaurant. And every day that I would pass the wet market to grab ingredients, I would also pass the soup kitchen that was pumping maybe 500, 600 servings of nutritious, hot, delicious meals for free for those in need every other day. And growing up, I never really had to deal with this sort of food insecurity. And so I truly admired all of the chefs that take up this initiative. However, I did talk to my mom about it afterwards, and I realized that a lot of these projects actually contribute quite a bit to the food wastage in our country's overall nutritional situation. And, that time I went back to the States and I did some of my own research, and I found out that 1/3 of all food produced globally is never actually eaten. That's over 1 billion tons, and the food industry, meaning cafeterias, commercial kitchens such as hospital kitchens and restaurants, is responsible for nearly 29% of that food waste. So it not only impacts our environment, but it's also a huge economic loss. And back in Vietnam, actually most of the vendors use gas stoves. And though I understand that these commercial kitchens don't really have the means or the budget to pay for an induction stove or even the privilege to do so, gas stoves in itself are responsible for nearly 13% of childhood asthma cases in the United States, and as well as gas cooking produces over 25 million tons of carbon pollution each year. That's a whopping 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions just by these gas stoves leaking methane. And so, these are all just numbers, and these numbers are important, but I also wanted to do research around my own town. I reached out to my local Lexington food kitchen where I would volunteer at, and I asked them a couple of questions. They prepare 70 meals each week, and they do tell me that by the end of each meal prep, they're left with a couple of ingredients, and especially during holidays, their gas prices jack up quite a lot due to just the sheer amount of meals that they're making. And, I personally don't think that you should waste any expense when it comes to helping those in need. But at the same time, I also think we can keep that same mission while also not putting these wonderful sort of initiatives in a tight spot when it comes to budgeting and resources. And so I guess I took my own initiative. Within this sort of batch making process, a lot of the poultry are symmetrical, and they follow a strict guideline, and this really helps for algorithmic approaches to encouraging food sustainability. So far I've been working with 5 kitchens and over 30 chefs for 4 months at this point. Let's Eat Together, Friday Supper Night, and Greater Boston In-Meal programs, and I'm about to work with two of the elementary schools in my town. And so far we've gotten some pretty good progress, $80 reduction in food costs per cycle, a $100 decrease in monthly gas usage, that's a 5% decrease, and then on average 20 minutes less time spent with stoves and ovens and grills. And these are all just obviously numbers, but as I'm making this meal right here, you realize that I'm using salmon for my dish, and interestingly, you can represent salmon as a 3D graph of sorts. Despite it being a salmon, like throughout most poultry, they follow a certain shape that you can, through enough averaging, you can model out using machines. And I guess knowing these 3D functions to represent salmon, you're able to find its heat conduction equation, and that narrows down to the cooking time if you're either roasting it in the oven or steaming it in a pan. And once you know that time of cooking and method of cooking, you can narrow it down to the amount of power used within that set amount of time. Most household kitchens and commercial ones follow a similar power system, so finding the number of watts used isn't actually too troublesome. Even using these same equations, you can figure out how long it will need to thaw out for without reaching a certain temperature where microorganisms are able to grow on, which is actually a huge factor in why people end up throwing away food before even beginning to cook it. Because even the smallest reduction in temperature variation can significantly impact the shelf life of food, in reducing the amount of food wasted, no matter how minimal, but it is quite in a large scale if you're talking about large scale kitchens. And it's not only just that, you can apply it to so many creative shapes. I make a lot of deep fried shrimp, shrimps can be represented as a polar graphs, and you use surface integration to find surface area to see how much batter you would need to fry a bucket of shrimp. Scale that amount of batter into the ratio needed for each ingredient, say how much water, how much flour, how much seasoning, and you've got a pretty accurate ingredient quantity at that point. And of course, it might just be saving only a few milliliters of ingredients, which may not seem much, but once again, for these big scale kitchens producing hundreds of meals so regularly, this waste does end up building up. And so my initial focus was the greater Boston area, partnering with the community kitchens around this area as well as the schools around my town. But I'd love to expand, considering it's a multi-million-dollar industry. Commercial kitchens that pump out 500, 600 servings of food every month, these commercial kitchens can save up to $1,000 a month by optimizing their operation, and that's just for food costs. There's also an additional maybe 500 monthly savings on energy alone. And if I do get the opportunity to expand and have funds to do so, I would love to improve my mathematical models and software to be able to adapt to the needs of larger commercial kitchens. At the end of the day, I'm doing a lot of these algorithms and 3D representations by hand using the knowledge I already have. A lot of software is able to do it just by taking a picture of something. And that technology, that's expensive, and I'd love to work with it someday in order to further my initiative. So I'm currently working on an app set to finish at the end of October that allows users to input a recipe, just ingredients, and give them suggestions for each step or alternative for any long processes involved that reduces time and appliance use. I plan to use this app as a pilot program that showcases the effect of these algorithms if I were to expand to maybe food kitchens outside of the state. And so recently I've been working with my local elementary school, and I've had to go through quite a bit of FDA approvals, and FDA certifications require quite a bit of money to go through because you would have to pay for food safety experts, because any change to nutritional programs have to meet FDA requirements. And so I'd love to use funding for that as well, so to get my algorithms into, once again, these large batch kitchens. And I'd love to invest more in marketing and just simply outreach. And so at this moment, it seems like I'm very against gas stovetops, and though I don't particularly like using them, I understand that some programs just don't have the viable budget, neither do they have the convenience to have one, and I completely understand that. What I'm aiming right now is just to minimize the use of that, and I'm also working on a project with my friend that we could maybe design a portable multi-induction stove that's lower cost and lightweight. Most of the ones already on the market use normal direct current circuit systems, so I thought of using multiple small transformers to form an alternating current system. Iron transformers are slightly cheaper, and using multiple might make it lightweight. But at the end of the day, the amount of sheer power needed to cook these batches of food, it's just really hard to make this sort of induction stove possible, and it's just something that I'd love to work on. And the next steps I want to take right now is further refining my mathematical models to accommodate more complex cooking scenarios, such as multi-stage preparation processes or refrigeration processes, salt dilution processes, and expanding my partnerships to include larger institutions, maybe outside of Massachusetts. Currently with the developing user-friendly app set to launch in November, which will provide real-time suggestions for optimal ingredients usage and cooking times, while reducing resource consumption. I really do hope this app will serve as a foundation for just my initiative in general. And so Eco Eats Equation is designed as a collaborative and supportive initiative to enhance sustainability practices. It's not really a telling how chefs should be cooking. A lot of chefs go by gut feeling when they cook, and that's totally understandable because I do too. That's just how I grew up learning how to cook. But instead of thinking of it that way, I want to think of it as a guideline or like a minimum requirement that can help ensure food safety and energy efficiency. The insights I provide are rooted in chemical principles and food safety standards, while also encouraging the chefs themselves to tweak anything they personally disagree with or alter just a little bit to fit their sort of community palate. And so these suggestions should just be tools to hopefully make these commercial kitchens' job easier and more sustainable. It's about working together to balance both safety, flavor, and environmental impact. And I hope we have fun experimenting, and at the end of the day, I'm here to learn and grow with chefs and mathematicians alike.